Hello, and welcome to the second session of the Stonebranch Userverse Online. Today's topic is the untapped power of Stonebranch and innovative real-world workflows that you didn't know were possible. My name is Nicole Crawford, and I will be your moderator today, and I'm also with Stonebranch. But before we get started, I just want to go over a quick few housekeeping items. We do want the session to be interactive, so if you have any questions, please put them in the Q&A chat box. We will do our best to get them answered before the end of the presentation. If for some reason we don't get their questions answered, we will definitely follow up with an email and get your questions answered. Also, in the right-hand section of your screen, you will see a little resource icon. There's some documentation and a link to the rest of the series for you to register. So with all of those housekeeping items wrapped up, it is my pleasure to introduce you to our presenter and our very own Scott Davis, who is our Chief Marketing Officer. Take it away, Scott.
Thank you, Nicole, and hello to everybody out there. I'm pretty excited about being here for this particular session. We've put a lot of effort into better understanding what use cases and workflows our installed base uses across the board. And what we've discovered is that there's a bunch of emerging use cases, a bunch of new workflows that are different from what you would think of when you're thinking of traditional legacy workload automation. So during today's session, today's event, we're going to, number one, explore some of those emerging and growing use cases. I think we'll go through over 10. And then the intent here is really to cross-pollinate orchestration patterns. It's to inspire you with these real-world use cases that realistically you can take advantage of today, right? So all of these use cases are possible with the Universal Automation Center. And let's go ahead and dive right in. So if you think about traditional workload automation, traditional SOAP, typically we're focused in this industry on the infrastructure operations and cloud side of the business. So Gartner would classify that as IO&C, and we do automation for mainframes, distributed servers, cloud. Then you have sort of IT-centric applications like DevOps or service management tools, ticketing tools, or data pipelines. And if you think about the more traditional use cases that probably just about everybody on this call today does with their Universal Automation Center, you're looking at these use cases. These are the ones that are all over our website. These are what we talk about. This is what most people do, right? You have some traditional workload automation, whether it's automating operating systems in a mainframe or whatever. You have cloud automation, you have infrastructure automation, both on-prem and in the cloud. You have data pipeline orchestration, DevOps automation. And for us, managed file transfer is a big piece of all the orchestrated automation that happens. But we do a research report each year, which many of you are probably familiar with. It's called the Global State of IT Automation. And one of the questions that we ask during this survey and the subsequent research report, the results, are what applications or tool categories do you currently automate with the workload automation or service orchestration and automation platform? And like past years, really the last 4 or 5 years, you have your cloud technologies at the top. This is the number one goal for everybody who's in the midst of this sort of modernization or transition to the cloud, right? So they're figuring out how to automate the cloud alongside their on-premises tools. What was new this year in the report is our addition of CRM, HRM, and ERP to the questions on this list. So we wanted to understand how many people are automating things like Salesforce or Workday or any of the ERP applications from SAP, Oracle. And the results were a little bit surprising, right? I mean, you have all this cloud stuff, you have all the traditional use cases that we just talked about, data pipeline, the DevOps, the things that are there. But then you had this, fourth and fifth on the list, you had CRM applications and HRM that emerged as like the top ones or top four, right? So um, it got us thinking like, okay, well, people are automating these tools with not just the UAC, all applications, but how big a piece of this is it? So we started doing exploration into that side of the business and the workflows and what's happening from our installed base today in cases where these are emerging. So what we're really talking about is saying, hey, you're traditionally doing this infrastructure operations and cloud IO&C side of the business with workload automation, but now we're starting to see people, of course, automating ERP. This ERP, especially SAP, has been something we've been automating for a long time. And the CRM, HRM, SCM, vertical applications, we see them really bubbling up. We see people connecting the dots, think back office to front office workflows that help with larger business processes, not just automating individual tools or individual jobs, right? So something that's more uh, business process focused, more workflow focused with multiple steps, multiple technologies. And those technologies can live on-prem or in the cloud or in containers, right? And the way we're thinking about this is you're really going to have workflows that are on both sides and then also connecting the dots here. So we're going to go through today workflows that are kind of emerging on the infrastructure side, and then we're going to go through workflows that are emerging on the enterprise business application side. And then we're also going to talk about some clever things we're seeing people do with AI within the workflows, um, which will be interesting because, again, these are things you can do today and you can start trying them out, testing them, right? So the ultimate goal is to connect that front office with the back office. And there's some things that make this possible that really didn't exist 5 years ago, 10 years ago. There's a reason this is emerging. Uh, Number one on the list is API integration. So the advent of the cloud, the standardization of APIs makes it so that these tools in the SOAP area can now connect to anything, which is a big change. Traditionally, when you were dealing with more legacy infrastructure, legacy tooling that was on-prem, everything was agents, right? If you go back in time, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, it's all agents. And we were born out of agents. 25 years ago, almost 26 years ago now, uh, Stonebranch built agents for mainframes, and we resold those agents in place of other people's agents. So it was kind of, we have transitioned this business an awful lot to doing the full process of workload automation and SOAP over the last 25 years. But now you have API integration in addition to these agent integrations. So you're able to cover a broader swath of applications across any place, right? So that's a big change over the last 5 years that just really didn't exist, at least at Stonebranch and most other businesses, right? In terms of the automation that can happen to those APIs. We also added a bunch of trigger capabilities, monitoring capabilities, but being able to trigger things from third-party applications, we've referred to that in the past as upstream integrations, makes interacting and doing some of these newer use cases very possible, right? Very, very interesting. And then, of course, we added webhooks and other event-based sort of triggers and monitors that make it possible to do and connect to things that you just couldn't in the past. On the other side of this chart, you have what we call here universal portal, which we talked about during the keynote. We have manual approval tasks, which have been there in the UAC for some time, but now we're improving these manual approval tasks in 7.9, which make business process automation like capabilities and even closer reality. Then, of course, you have general self-service tasks that you can tap into via Teams or Slack or other communication tools. So the sort of market shift towards the cloud, the advent of API as a standardization, the self-service capabilities that we've put in place to make it so that this is no longer just a technical IT tool for technical IT people, but a platform that can be managed by IT and then provided to the larger business as a service, we call it automation as a service via uh, these self-service capabilities is really the driver behind some of these emerging case studies and use cases. So let's go ahead and dive into the first set of workflows that we'll talk about today. And again, these are all focused on sort of the traditional infrastructure operations and cloud side of the business. And then we'll talk about the ones that are on the business side in just a moment. So the first one, and this is going to be like 3 or 4 slides per use case. I'm going to go fast because I've got a bunch to share. I'll say up front that we'll make these slides available afterwards. So while some of this, there's a lot on a slide, they're all patterns. So they're things that you can take and replicate inside of your environment, depending on the tools that you have. So let me orient you to this slide. The first use case we're going to talk about here is disaster recovery failover. So across the top, going horizontally, you have your business process or your process steps. So in this case, there's an anomaly detected, there's approvals that are initiated, there's a failover transition that happens, and there's the ultimate restoration and recovery that happens. Now, one of the things we wanted to illustrate within these slides is that this is not a process that is just focused on IT or just focused on security or just focused in the business unit. So what we're doing is we're calling out where these applications sit, who typically owns these applications, right? It could be that we'll get into some business ones and you'll have CRM, Salesforce, which is typically owned by sales, and that would be the line of business that owns it. And then what you see here, and I'll use my mouse a little bit, you have the observability section, the ITSM stage, the notification approval stage. And we've listed some of the applications that are just common applications that sit here. So you may recognize a logo and say, hey, I've got Jira or I've got ServiceNow. Clearly, this is something that I can do. So it's sort of signaling that. Now, let's talk about disaster recovery and this actual use case versus just orienting to the slide. So, disaster recovery is one that we see popping up more and more, with the cloud, with people needing to maintain critical infrastructure and critical tools all the time. If somebody's infrastructure, cloud infrastructure goes down, you need a way to spin it back up very quickly. And so we do that via automation, and we can do it with manual approvals installed. We can do it with other forms of self-remediation that just spin this up very quickly and make it so there's not like a huge nightmare if something goes down. Of course, it's never easy if something goes down, but this makes sure you always have that infrastructure up. So as you can see, it crosses a number of different lines of business, and there are different stages that go all the way through. Now, in addition to this slide, in every one of these will have a workflow pattern slide. So this is an example of a pattern that you may be able to follow with some steps that you can add in that illustrate how to build this up in the UAC today. This particular pattern is nice and built out. We have some companies that come and buy just disaster recovery failover capabilities from us as part of the UAC. And it's not like a separate offering, but they buy us predominantly for this disaster recovery failover piece, and then they'll add on other use cases as they go. But if you look through this workflow, it starts off with this system monitor that is happening. So it'll notice if there's a failure. Typically that is pulled off of observability data that we're pushing out either via our open telemetry connector or just directly from the UAC, depending on what you're monitoring. There'll be alert that goes out typically to your ITSM tool. In this case, we selected ServiceNow, there's a ticket that's created, and then we have two separate steps here as options. One is a auto approval if the policy is adhered to within what the rules are for this workflow, or there may be a human approval that's required. And we'll talk a good bit about human approval today, because again, there's a new feature in UAC 7.9, which came out last month, actually earlier this month, sorry. And it's it's something that makes it much more simple for anybody to be able to be part of that human approval process, not just the administrators, but any person in the business. Once this approval happens, whether it's sort of, let me go back here, self-remediated or it's approved to be remediated, your infrastructure is spun up. So this will spin up an actual infrastructure piece. Typically, if somebody's managing infrastructure with UAC, they may be tapped into Ansible, Terraform, spin up a virtual environment, and then they'll do that on any of the major cloud service providers, Azure, AWS, Google Cloud Platform. Then, of course, you restore your application data. So that's going to be spun back up. You're going to reconfigure your network routing. You're going to run the health checks. You're then going to notify service now that the recovery is fixed, and you're going to close out that ticket. And then, of course, you can add a whole bunch of steps. I think the most interesting thing about a platform like Universal Automation Center is there is no standard default way to do this. There is no one size fits all pattern. You'll see different companies using different tools, different steps, different ways to accomplish this. And I think what's interesting about this use case is you have, of course, the observability monitoring that you're doing, but it's also spinning up infrastructure. It's also spinning up applications. It's integrating with all kinds of different tools. So this is a good one that you can do again today if it's something that you prefer to do. Now, the real reasons to do this disaster recovery, the benefits of it, all have to do with just automatically orchestrating these failovers. So if something happens, it comes back up quickly. There's minimal disruption to the business as you fix up whatever did happen. You can minimize manual intervention this way. Again, you can have it totally manual, but that's a problem in and of itself. So you want to minimize that manual intervention. You want to make it happen automatically. And then you're ensuring consistency, repeatable recovery across all these environments. All right, that's the first one we'll talk through. The second one that we're seeing pop up within our install base is what I'll call advanced scheduling for an iPaaS. So iPaaS, for those of you that are not intimate with it, it just stands for integration platform as a service. So some common iPaaS tools would be things like Boomi, MuleSoft, Workato. Sometimes you see a blurring of the lines between iPaaS tooling and workflow automation tools. But ultimately, iPaaS tools are used to connect two applications together and pass the data between those applications. In this example, what we're seeing are people use iPaaS tools to connect things like CRM and ERP, connect things like CRM to data storage or any number of different applications. Now, there's benefits that you get with connecting an iPaaS to a scheduler or an advanced scheduling SOAP platform like UAC. And I'll talk through some of those benefits, but the most obvious is you get the centralized control, the advanced scheduling capabilities that none of these iPaaS tools really have, right? Now, a workflow pattern in how we're thinking about this could look something like this, but again, it could be anything. It really depends on the workflow or business process that you're trying to build. So this one illustrates a workflow that moves data out of Salesforce and into a way where you can move it into your ERP system, but then also move it into a data visualization tool. So you can do analysis, predictive analysis, opportunity and lead analysis, whatever you'd wind up reporting on from your CRM tool. And typically you'll see the, you know, something like in this case, we chose Boomi. You would transfer the data from CRM to AWS via Boomi, or transfer data from CRM to your ERP tool like an SAP via Boomi. And what we do is we come in as the orchestrator, so we connect to Salesforce, we connect to Boomi, we connect to AWS, or we can actually just connect to Boomi if it's connected to those other two tools, and we can control Salesforce or AWS or Salesforce via your Boomi integration. So that kind of brings us to an interesting example here. So what you're really doing when you connect to an iPaaS with something like the Universal Automation Center is you're connecting whatever you can connect to via your iPaaS. You can also then connect Universal Automation Center to. So you can automate really any tool that the iPaaS is connected to. And thus you can orchestrate any tooling that the iPaaS is connected to. This is a way that you can tap into other tools that you may not have an integration for yet. You don't feel like writing an integration if it's already connected via the iPaaS. You add this advanced event-based orchestration to your iPaaS. So your typical iPaaS is going to be batch in nature. It's typically, you can do some workflow type work with iPaaSes. You can create processes, but ultimately it's not running in real time like you see something from Universal Automation Center. So finally, the last thing that you're able to add is really just that security, observability, and governance that comes with the Universal Automation Center, in addition to the centralized visibility and control that you get through monitoring and doing everything through Universal Automation Center, tapping into the iPaaS. So the iPaaS jobs are monitored and scheduled right alongside all the other jobs in these, various workflows. So there may not be necessarily a technical benefit to this, though. And what I mean by that is we've had customers that come and they integrate to, say, ServiceNow via the iPaaS instead of just using our direct ServiceNow integration. And that's fine, right? It really comes down to preference. And the reason somebody would do that is because they want to manage all the integrations and everything that happens through their iPaaS solution. It's in place, and it allows them to see all these integrations from the same place versus having to go to multiple tools. So you can accomplish, say, sending a failure ticket and opening a ticket via direct integration from us or through the iPaaS. Again, really just comes down to preference. All right. The next use case and workflow pattern that we'll talk about has to do with infrastructure and software implementation. So really what we're talking about in this use case is you sell something, right? The contract is signed. The approvals are initiated to approve it with the various tools. The infrastructure and software would be implemented automatically via workflow, and then it would be delivered to the ultimate client, right? In this particular use case, while it's talking about infrastructure and software implementation, we're looking at the workflow here as if from us, Stonebranch sells Universal Automation Center or our agents, and then somebody wants to spin those up. So this use case comes from our actual internal process. And I'll show you some really built out workflows that you won't be able to read all of, but again, I'll give the slides afterwards. You can get a sense for what the patterns look like and what you may want to put in place as you're building these out. So much like the workflow above, this pattern looks more simplistic than it actually is. But in this case, you have the contract is signed. That happens inside of Salesforce. You could trigger a ticket that's opened inside of, in this case, Jira. That ticket with all the information about the customer and what they bought goes to an approval stage. That approval stage happens, and then we run all of the automation to, in this case, spin up a environment, like a cloud hosting environment, like a SaaS environment. and then actually deploy the tech stack, the Universal Automation Center, the agents. We push out the documentation back to, say, Jira, that it was fixed and then or launched, and then we give the handover to the customer. So when you actually expand each one of these steps, you get a workflow that looks something like this. And this particular workflow, again, is very similar to what we use internally. It was the actual workflow that we used a couple years ago. We've improved and evolved it since then. But what you can see is this one taps into Terraform, Ansible to spin up the cloud environment. And again, I don't expect everybody to be able to read all these steps, but we can share this information. You can work with us to come up with what these steps look like in your environment and make them make sense for you. Then in this example, this is a workflow that actually spins up one of our agents on the new infrastructure, or this actual workflow will spin up infrastructure in and of itself, and then launch the agent, attach it to whatever OMS it needs to be attached to, connect all the dots between the controller and the databases, and there's just a number of really powerful steps that are in here. So the reason that you would do this is really it comes down to reducing deployment time. For us, the most important factor here is it used to take us 2 days to implement a customer, turning on UAC and the agents and just installing the software. Now we've got that down to 15 minutes. And that's just with our traditional SaaS deployment. If you if you were participating in the keynote earlier this year, or earlier this week, oh, actually, yeah, Tuesday, keynote on Tuesday, you saw Nils actually demo something where we've reduced the time to install something if you're using containers to like 2 minutes. So we've got the quickest, easiest platform to install across the business. And we just made it easier with this containerized piece. But you can do it via containers, you can do it via traditional cloud infrastructure, traditional everything else. Now, the other thing that you're doing is you're eliminating human error, right? Just moving field to field when you're copying and pasting something from a dev to a production environment can be fatal when building these things. So automating it, having it variabilized and moving it the way you need to really speeds things up and makes it so that you can't make those mistakes. And then of course, you're just removing the manual maintenance when things need to be upgraded later on in the future. So this is a good use case. We do it internally for our software delivery, but you can deliver anything like this. You can spin up any infrastructure. It doesn't have to be triggered by a Salesforce request. It can be an internal request that you spin up and spin down infrastructure. You install software on your infrastructure. You can make it very repeatable. You could see this and imagine this being used internally at the department level, internally to support different use cases around the business, where you spin up infrastructure, spin up a quick container or a instance of UAC, somebody uses it, then they want to take it down, right? We see that happening in some instances too. Or, you want to have multiple instances of UAC for different departments. It's really easy to spin them up and not taxing to keep them maintained. All right, so let's move on to our next IO or infrastructure and operations and cloud use case, and it's data from edge devices. So this one is pretty interesting. If you think about edge devices, they take all shapes and forms. It's any sort of IoT device, Internet of Things device that's out there in the world. Could be on a manufacturing shop floor, watching manufacturing machinery or robotics, could be something that's tracking deliveries, could be energy. People use IoT devices in all kinds of different industries. Our use case here today is looking at a point of sale solution in a retail environment. So we have a number of companies, specifically grocery stores, right? Very large grocery stores, global grocery stores, that basically put an agent, one of our agents, inside of the point of sale device. And then either in real time or batched up at the end of the day, they will transfer all of that transaction data and rich customer data from the point of sale devices. So typically grocery stores have tons of point of sale devices, and move them over into some sort of centralized storage so that it can be analyzed. Or they're moving it to the CRM or ERP tool so that it can be counted against inventory and restocking and everything else that would need to happen from that sort of plane. Now, a workflow pattern looks something like this. You have all of your different POS systems. In this case, we're just using the same one. I believe it's Shopify. When that data is done, you would either do it again at the end of the day, or you might do it in real time, like as data is coming through, passing it through, and you're managed file transferring that data. And of course, we have UDM or UDMG, depending on where you need to transfer this data. In this case, just over to AWS ETL, which is AWS Glue. So we're going to transform the data so it fits nice and neat into our AWS Redshift database, but could be Snowflake, could be any database. And then we sync that data, in this case, with your CRM tool, your Salesforce, your ERP tool, our accounting tools with SAP. And then we're also going to push the data out to some visualization so people can analyze the sales data easily, right? But once again, this is a pattern. It's one example of how this could look. And there's some, again, just if you haven't thought about it before, there's all kinds of places you can put agents or connect via these APIs. And this is a good example of where you can go and gather data, transfer it into your central repositories or central storage or your applications to actually make use of it in the moment or later on. When I look at this workflow, what I actually see is a data pipeline workflow, right? So this looks just like a data pipeline workflow. It's just, in this case, the source systems, instead of being an application someplace, the source system is your POS device or your IoT device that's sitting out there. So we like this one. We see it in retail, we see it in energy, we see it in a number of different places that make a lot of sense. So at the end of the day, the big benefit here is you're able to move data from these edge devices in real time to your enterprise systems. You're improving visibility and accuracy by doing it regularly, and you're connecting these dots between your point of sale, your edge devices, your CRM tools, your ERP tools, and your BI platforms. One of the side use cases that I can imagine here, although I'm not familiar with any businesses doing it that are customers right now, is because you can make this data real time, you could put it into some sort of dynamic pricing tool, where as you get pricing in, now you can adjust pricing on the fly in the store. So let's say there's an example, let's not use grocery store anymore, let's use a movie theater. You go and you concessions are down or movie tickets are down, so you want to sell more. You have the pricing come through from the transaction data showing that, well, we're not selling that many hot dogs today. Let's go ahead and sell more hot dogs. So you actually reduce the prices on the hot dogs based on real-time data. I could imagine something like that. I say hot dogs, popcorn, whatever it is, Snickers, right? Or we're not selling as many tickets today, but we got a lot of walk-by traffic outside the theater, so we're gonna, do some sort of deal or special dynamically based on the data for ticket prices. Any of those sorts of things become very interesting. Okay, so let's do our first poll. Nicole, let me pass it over to you.
Yes, thank you, Scott. All right, so this is audience participation. We'd love to hear from you. Which of these business use cases are you most excited about? And I'll give everyone just a few seconds to put their answers in.
We probably should have added one that was none. I don't care about any of these, but that's okay. We'll force everybody to give us their best, most interesting one. And it's okay if you guys are not, these aren't for everybody. These are just examples, they're ideas, right? Intended to spawn other ideas for you. So let's give it a few seconds here to continue voting. Nicole, when it's slowing down, let's pull them up. Okay. So yeah, I thought that the disaster recovery failover would be really interesting to a lot of people. Um, Infrastructure, software deployment. You could argue that infrastructure and software deployment is something we've done for years, but I think it's something that not everybody does, right? And so there's a lot you can do there. Just mention it on the infrastructure and software deployment side. You can deploy infrastructure and software directly from UAC. You'll do that in smaller instances where you don't need a lot of control. Alternatively, what we see people doing is at the enterprise grade level, they'll have Terraform, they'll have Ansible, they'll have a bunch of tools that are used to manage infrastructure. And so what winds up happening is much like the workflow that I showed, where UAC is being used to orchestrate all those other automation tools or all those other infrastructure tools that are used to spin up the infrastructure. So you can kind of do it from both sides of the business, depending on your use case. Okay, thanks for sharing that information. We'll do another one about the business use cases shortly. And that means that it is time to dive into enterprise business application automation. So these are some additional use cases. One of the ones that, again, we do internally is employee onboarding. So you have this whole thing that has to happen every time an employee is brought on to work for your company. And it starts with recruitment. I've seen this type of use case called hire to retire as well, because it also would cover the offboarding and the training that happens throughout the process. You can really build out a process that covers an employee's entire life cycle at a business. But here we're talking specifically about employee onboarding. So you're recruiting them, they accept the offer, they are going to need to have all these systems onboarded. They need their MS Entra or Active Directory is what it used to be called, set up, their email set up, their licenses for CRM, ERP, maybe some employee recognition tools, their LMS, their learning management systems, and ultimately they need to get paid, right? So within this workflow that crosses sales, finance, potentially basically the entire business, but starts with human resources and has a lot of IT focus, a workflow could look in a simplistic form something like this. So candidate goes through the recruitment process via Workday, their HRM tool. When they are brought on, there is a new ticket created with, in this case, ServiceNow, although internally we use Jira, and I'll show some examples from that. You're spinning up the account setup in LMS. We use Bonusly internally as a reward system. So you could set up somebody inside of that with their licensing. You can set them up in their ERP solutions or any other solutions that exist. And then once the ticket's complete, it goes back to completion status or resolution status in ServiceNow, and then everybody's notified, right? So you can set this up so it triggers all these processes. And just to give you a sense for what it looks like internally for us, this is an employee onboarding ticket in Jira. And what you can see here is that it's basically a list of all the applications and all the systems that somebody has turned on, right? When they start. And of course, this is configurable. You can add other tools based on the ticket. This is just for this particular employee. The sensitive data has been grayed out, so no big deal there. But this is a Jira ticket. And then what our tool does is it reads the Jira ticket and then pulls its instructions from the Jira ticket on what it should spin up and what it should spin or create licenses for and everything else. So an internal workflow that we use today looks just like this. So it has all of these components. There's different steps. Again, I don't expect anybody to be able to read each one of these steps, just knowing that the actual automated jobs that make these workflow patterns a reality can really expand depending on what you want to do. And there are steps to automate the entire process once that Jira ticket is sent off and executed. When somebody's leaving your business, in this case, Stonebranch, we have the opposite. So we can offboard them. And so we do that here too. We have the process to take them out of Active Directory or Entra, to remove their licenses, to forward their email address to someplace else, make sure their storage is kept, all those different things that you need to do when you offboard something. It really reduces all the time that's required for this. So at the end of the day, your employee onboarding and offboarding process is something that every single person on this call today could easily set up in their business and make a reality. And there's whole tools that focus just on doing this, but they're going to be really good at doing it in a very, uh, you have to do it our way or go the highway sort of approach with employee onboarding and offboarding. With this, it's very much set up so that you can make it however you want, right? It can be formed and curated to your business. So you're automating this whole process. You're accelerating the employee lifecycle by making all of this spun up the day before or whenever the person starts. So it creates a much cleaner onboarding process for new employees. And then, of course, you do maintain that same control and visibility throughout the process. So this is a good one we see people doing, one we're using internally because, heck, it's awesome, right? It just works. The next business-focused pattern and workflow that I'm going to talk about is CRM and ERP orchestration. So there's probably a lot of people on the call today who are using Universal Automation Center to automate their ERP system. We've got tons of ERP customers, and they do business processes that are very embedded, very deep into Salesforce or Oracle or PeopleSoft or JD Edwards, whatever it is that they're connecting to. But there's also a business case here where companies need to and want to integrate their CRM data with their ERP data. Now, there's a number of ways to do that. Just to build the integration, you can use a point-to-point offering, something that is built inside of Salesforce or built inside of SAP that connects these. You can use third-party integration tools. You can use a traditional iPaaS to do this, and that's what a lot of companies do. They'll use Boomi or MuleSoft to connect the dots here. But you can't, it's not as customizable as point-to-point integrations. Or they'll write scripts, which is a little scary, right? They'll write scripts that automate the movement of data. Now, when you're doing that, and this data is moving back and forth between these systems, if you're using scripts, if you're using point-to-point, even if you're using iPaaS in a lot of cases, it's not real time. It's going to be batch. And also, the data, as it gets moved, it can break. So I run into this all the time between not CRM and ERP, but CRM, our Salesforce instance, and our HubSpot instance. And when it breaks down, a sync error happens. I'm not notified. I don't know, right? Unless I'm using UAC to monitor these things, then I get an alert. I can root cause where the problem was and get real deep into making sure that it's fixed right away. And the same is true when you're orchestrating this automation that's happening between CRM and ERP. Now, when I think about this particular use case and workflow, it's fundamental to automating larger business processes. So a lot of people, like I said, automate SAP today, but you can automate Salesforce or any of your CRM applications. When you're doing those things together, you can get deeper into automating business processes that span CRM, ERP, and other business areas. So think of this one as, once you're integrated in there, you can do a whole lot more. You can go deeper into the workflows that happen inside of these specific tools. So one example workflow that happens inside of just an ERP solution might be close of business or financial close. Well, you can automate those processes within your ERP solution and go deeper. I would call that going deeper into the application. And that's not necessarily something that has to be tied to CRM, but it's sure a lot better it's a lot better if you have it tied to it and pulling that real-time data into those processes. So, at the end of the day, you're unifying these two platforms, you're connecting to them, so now you can include them in larger workflows, which we'll talk about in a moment, and you're accelerating this front end to back end synchronization of real-time data. So it's again, foundational. I would say if you're going to do any of these other ones, make sure you get integrations for Salesforce and ERP and start connecting the dots. So the next one I'm going to talk about is called lead to opportunity. So lead to opportunity is a business process where you are on the sales and marketing side of the business, capturing and connecting the dots between the business process of identifying leads, calling those leads, qualifying those leads, passing those leads to the sales force as an opportunity that they're working, and then managing the reporting of that data that flows all the way through to your business intelligence tools or wherever you do your reporting. So again, this one is straight up a business process. This is something that in IT, you may never think about automating, but it's very much something that is automated by your marketing and sales team right now. It's just not well automated. It's done via those point-to-point or scripts. It's not managed very well often. And it's not something that has the potential to kick off great reporting strategies or whatever else. So there's a lot of opportunity for you to go in and help your counterparts in sales and marketing and sales ops and marketing ops build out workflows like this. And a workflow pattern would look something like this. In this case, you're identifying in your first step your target prospects. So ZoomInfo would be a tool that you use to pull a list of people you want to go after. You would enhance that data and push it into something like a Sales Loft, which is a prospecting tool typically for business development reps or SDRs. And then once that data happens, it's synced with your marketing automation tool data. In this case, we're calling out Pardot because we're staying inside of the Salesforce ecosystem. Pardot is integrated with MuleSoft, which is their iPaaS solution to Salesforce. And then once Salesforce, that opportunity data is updated, you want to push that data, in this case, via MFT, via UAC, to a backup so the data is always captured and kept. But then you also want to initiate this data pipeline so that you can do reporting on that data. So you get the whole process, and what you're really doing is you're tapping into Salesforce, you're tapping into SalesLoft, ZoomInfo via their APIs. You're triggering processes that are built in those tools, and you're able to add this automation and observability and SLA tracking to the whole process. So you're unifying everything that's happening between marketing, IT, and sales. For those of you that are in IT out there that are troubled by shadow IT, this gives you a platform that you can actually offer as a service to your sales teams and your marketing teams. So they're not off buying things on their own or trying to cobble something together. It's actually built into the rest of your business. You're automating this real-time lead and sales reporting. So by default, the fact that this is event-based and trigger-based means you can pull up a dashboard for your business to analyze opportunity data or lead data and do reporting based on data that just happened, that's in real time. It's as real time as the data that you're from the systems you're pulling, where you're getting the data. And if that data is real time, the whole thing's real time. So you could build a real time reporting pipeline for leads and opportunities. And then ultimately you're empowering sales and marketing with access to this automation that helps their business. All right, the next one is quote to cash. Now, if you think about the one we just talked about, where you're looking at the lead to an opportunity stage, this one picks up at the point where it's an opportunity. You're given a quote all the way to the point where somebody is getting, you're getting paid for your services. So, this lead gen piece right here could encompass all of the last workflows. So you could actually put these workflows next to each other and have a full, end-to-end business process, starting from the point where you get the lead all the way to where you get uh, paid by the customer and do ongoing payments and invoices. But let's talk through this one, the quote to cash side. You do your lead gen, you're getting your quote. Typically, that's in some sort of CPQ system. Salesforce has its own CPQ, but there's a number of other CPQ systems that are on the market that you can tap into and use with any of the CRM solutions out there. You are going to push this quote data over to ERP. You're going to push the sales data over to ERP. You may do some sort of contract lifecycle management. So this encompasses the signing of the contract as part of the process. So you can make it a very linear process. And then again, you're moving over to this payment stage, and then ongoing payments and all the financial stuff that needs to happen so that you have regular updated data in both your CRM and ERP solutions. Now, the workflow could look something like this. Again, a pattern. You're capturing and qualifying the leads in Salesforce. You're moving it over to CPQ to do all the quote and pricing information. That has to get signed off via, in this case, we chose DocuSign. Once that's signed, it gets pushed into your ERP solution, in this case, SAP. It'll sync that data back using one of our other workflows. Remember, foundational workflow between ERP and CRM. It'll sync that data back to Salesforce, that it's signed and being paid. You can open a fulfillment ticket if you have something to deliver that is maybe this right here triggers the whole software delivery workflow that we talked about earlier. So you can start to imagine workflows nested inside of workflows that make a lot of sense. And then ultimately you're receiving payment and you're syncing that data into SAP. So quote to cash is very much sales and finance alignment in addition to marketing. This is an example workflow that we did as a proof of concept. You can see also a number of nested workflows within this. Each one of these has, if it has these 3 arrows, there's a whole workflow built into that, but this is just the top level one. This is to trigger this for the demo, but assuming that there's new data in Salesforce, the sales order gets pushed along to SAP. There's some tabulation processes, some RPA processes that happen in this one. And then the service order is delivered as a alert via email to someone. So again, this one's just a simplistic workflow, but there's a number here that workflows that could be nested. So we have this cool workflow that we've done for one of our customers that's all about managing and automating the commission process or commission payout process for sales reps. And in this case, you're setting up the deal, it's sold, it floats over to an approval process. Yes, it's bought. There's some tracking that happens down here, passing it off to your GL, but also it's sending it over to run the commission statements and do all that automated with all the processes that are involved in commission, and ultimately making it so that you can pay out to somebody. So this could be a nested workflow inside of the workflow above to make sure that, yeah, you're paying people, but then you also have a good way to calculate commissions and pay those out based off the Salesforce and ERP data. So something that's done today by some customers and things you can start doing right now. So big benefits here, obviously. I'm going to flow forward to the CRM trigger. Now, in this case, you're actually doing a trigger for self-service. So you're putting a trigger in Salesforce. We have a customer that hits a button inside of Salesforce. That button spins up a virtual environment doing infrastructure orchestration. Then it sends an email and uploads a file of their software to our MFT, in this case, UDMG. It notifies the customer, and then the customer can download that software. So this is basically, this workflow shows a delivery workflow of your software to the customer with all the license information and everything else, based on a self-service button that can be clicked by a sales rep or whoever inside of CRM. So the workflow pattern looks like this. It's basically what I just talked about. So I won't be too redundant since we're coming more towards the end of time here, but it's really a good one. And here's an example of a nested workflow within that workflow that's actually setting up the the end user that you're sending to, and everything else inside of UDMG, our B2B file transfer tool, so that this can be delivered and opened and downloaded by the recipient of this email, your new customer. Lots of benefits here, but ultimately you're triggering automated workflows from Salesforce, which I think is cool. You're empowering sales, services, and marketing teams with that automation, where basically people want to do automation from the tools they use every day. Most of the people on this call right now probably live and breathe or in UAC often, but your stakeholders don't want to be in a lot of cases. So having these self-service options, the ability to trigger stuff, the ability to do everything is important. So I've got a bonus workflow that I want to share here, and I just like this. So I'm going to call out Helen Pampanalia from Vermont Information Processing. She shared this with me. She showed an earlier version of this years ago on a webcast with us, but at the end of the day, this is a deployment workflow, and they want to, in this case, update the tools, the data stage, to go and go do the manual process approvals that need to happen during that update. So each one of these little circle people here is a human approval step. So in essence, this is more of a business process automation workflow than it is a traditional workload automation workflow. You have processes where humans have to go do something, check something, then approve that it's ready to move on to the next stage. And they use this every time they do an update to data stage or the workflows that happen there. They want to update the jobs, whatever happens, they, as a team, come together and work as a team to each have their own roles and responsibilities in here. So that becomes even better with this new feature that we introduced and talked about during the online keynote a couple of days ago, but you'll get more detail on during the 7.9 update. And it's this manual task approval. So you have the ability to really configure who receives these manual approval processes, and you can set it up so that multiple people have to approve something, or one person within a group of people, or multiple people in a row have to approve something during each stage. So there's a lot of cool stuff that happens. And this is just a quick screen grab of what a business person would see if they had a manual approval process and they just needed to, say, approve it, or they wanted to look at the details of it, see who else needs to approve it in the stage. So it's a cool feature, makes a lot of this business process approval much easier, and ultimately makes it so that your business users can use the tool Universal Automation Center much easier. Here's a dashboard for Human in the Loop, and I'm going to keep going. So I know I'm at time, but for the sake of this, I am going to go probably 10 minutes over here because I really want to show these AI workflows. And when we're done with this, you can always see what you missed if you have to leave now by coming back and watching the replay or the on-demand version of this, which we'll send out later on today. So I'm going to use this same disaster recovery workflow pattern that we showed earlier above, and I'm going to illustrate where you can drop in potential AI jobs, right? So to explain this just a little bit, these what Hussein showed, a lot of what Hussein demoed during the online or userverse kickoff on Tuesday was focused on adding or building workflows that have AI jobs inside of them. So today, you can add a ChatGPT job, you can add a Claude job, you can add a Google Gemini job. You can add different stages where AI is used to do something as part of these workflows. And there's some good uses of that inside of a disaster recovery workflow that are make it very illustrative. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is adding, you could potentially add a workflow or a nested workflow right here at this early stage that says, okay, there's a problem, but we don't want to pass our personal identifiable information or any sort of sensitive information off to any other tools as part of this workflow. So we're going to use an AI model that that goes and detects this data, then masks it so that this sensitive data isn't read by other LLMs or other tools that you want to keep the sensitive data out of. So that nested workflow that Hussein showed looks something like this. You collect the failed task in this case. So a task or something fails. There's a workflow right here or an AI tool right here, Llama, that uh, checks using a specialized PII AI model to check this stuff. It removes that information, then passes the rest of it through to Gemini. And the whole intent here was that you didn't want to send that personal identifiable information over to Gemini. So you use this offline AI model to remove it, then pass it to the online model to open the service incident. So another AI sort of piece that you could add or job that you could add to the beginning of this workflow would be to summarize sort of noisy AI logs and metrics. So if there's a problem or you're getting a bunch of alerts, it's sometimes asinine to have to flow through all the log data, all the alerts, just to figure out what's happening. You can use AI to peruse all of that data, read it, and come up with and summarize what actually happened using all that data and make recommendations around how to fix it. So in this case, it would summarize that data. It would push it over the summary over to a ServiceNow ticket. So the person who's brought in to fix it at the help desk has that information available to them. So we think that's pretty cool. Another place where AI could be used in this workflow is to triage new incidents and reroute the appropriate queue based on classification. So in this case, you could use AI. We're saying ChatGPT in this case. It's reading the ticket. It's telling us how important it is. Is it critical? Is it classified as critical? Is it not such a big deal? And then it pushes and routes the actual ticket off to the right person based on those classifications. So AI can be embedded in to help with routing and classification based on the log data or the unstructured data that's part of the job. Another way we see this being used, we talked a lot about infrastructure deployment. Well, that's pretty cool. But let's say you want to have guardrails in infrastructure deployment. You want to add something. You can do that with AI. You can put the rules in place. Don't allow them to open up this much space for this kind of use case or whatever. And based on the use case or why people are opening it, the AI can say, hey, this isn't in compliance. This doesn't fit with our security. This doesn't fit our policies. There's errors, whatever it is. And you can gate when this stuff gets turned on at different levels. So you can use AI to help you determine if what's been submitted via self-service, as an example, is appropriate. And you might want to do that for cost control. Like, I don't want to spin up a huge instance of AWS if I just need a small instance, so you could save money that way. And then finally, we have this concept of automation or automate decisions with AI-powered insights. So you could be that you have a decision check. The example that we used during the keynote was to say, hey, there's 3 jobs that need to run here. If only 2 of them run and they're complete enough based on the criteria, let's go ahead and finish this workflow. So you can do stuff like that, but it could be that it's reading log data and making decisions. It could be that it's collecting context and making decisions. So you can really have a workflow step like this anywhere, uh, assuming applicability, right? So there's some honorable mentions that we didn't get into today. I mean, obviously, I went over by some time here that I wish I hadn't, but you can see that there's other workflows that we have examples of in close of business, which is basically closing each day in a finance process. You have financial close, which is monthly close, quarterly close. All of this can be done inside of your ERP tool for the most part, but you have to get that data into the ERP tool. You have to get all the data there somehow. And so you wind up having source systems connected, data pipelines that are built that can enhance these things. You also have procure to play. This is a procurement one. I'm sorry, procure to pay. That's the point at which somebody internally wants to buy something, and there has to be a series of process approvals before, by their boss, by finance, by IT, before they can buy that thing, and then it gets purchased. So you can build workflows that are very business process driven, uh, that connect to and open up tickets once these things are all approved by the appropriate people. So that one's a more simplistic one, but I think it's something again everybody could implement. You have marketing campaign orchestration. We showed a few of them, and man, it was a few of the marketing sales ones. This one can get crazy. You can have all kinds of different steps. There's tons of MarTech out there. In fact, I'll offer this: if anybody out there wants to pull me in to work with them to build out a marketing campaign orchestration use case, reach out. I'll work with any customer that's interested in this. I'll add my 2 cents. I can help you design the workflows, mostly because I want the use case. I think it's a good one that everybody could take advantage of. So if I can partner with a customer to build something, then I'll be happy to do that. And then obviously observability, you have a lot of workflows around self-remediation that we could have talked about. Some of that was built into the uh, the DR workflow that we showed repeatedly, but there's all kinds of self-remediation sort of things you can do. And when you start thinking about embedding AI into these workflows, it's not hard to imagine a world where uh, it's more auto remediation, right? So something happens, AI reads the log file, sees that it's an obvious problem that was just time-based. So maybe a server was booked up and couldn't run it, and AI says, just go ahead and rerun it. No human involved, right? Or rerun it 5 times before it's done. I know you can do that with the controller without AI, but once you have AI in there, you can decide whether to run it or not. So there's some neat things you can do with self-remediation. Maybe we'll do some of these workflows at another webcast. So one more poll question for those of you that are still around. Nicole, you want to read this one?
Yeah, yes, thank you. Okay, which of these business use cases are you most, oh, there we go. Which of these business use cases are you most excited about? Give everyone just a few minutes to answer those questions. And I know
Yeah,
we're
and
over
like
time.
the other ones, if you don't care about any of these, just don't hit the button, right? But if there is something here that you think you can use in your business or you want to run down, tell everybody we can help, right? These are places where we can put more time, build out more detailed patterns, everything else. So Nicole, how are we doing? Is it coming to an end?
Yes, looks like human process approval workflow is the winner. Oh,
Yeah.
no, I'm sorry. Embedded AI jobs and workflow.
Yeah.
Way outpaced.
Yeah. So the human process approval is powerful here. The embed AI quote to cash, nothing. That's funny. CRM and ERP sync, nothing. So it's also interesting. But of course, there's good workflows there. We'll have to see if we do anything with it. All right. So I'm going to go back and I think I saw a lot of questions coming through.
Yeah.
In
Yeah.
the scheme of things, I'm happy to stay on and answer those questions if people are still on. But I recognize we're way over. So I'll answer some of them to the extent that I can, and then we'll jump off. So question one, what's the best way to connect a system to UAC if there's no built-in integration available? Good question. So you have a few different options. Number one, we have a software development kit that is in our documentation. It has templates, so you can build your own integrations, and we have people do that all the time. We have people, I've seen integrations built with real detailed ones with ETL tools like DataStage. I've seen integrations built with Google collaboration tools. You name it, I've seen it. So you can build these, and if there's an API, then it's really easy to build. Alternatively, reach out to us, right? We have a team of people that are building integrations. If there's something that you're interested in and we see that it could be interesting to other people in our install base, we'll go ahead and work with you to build it. Could be proof of concept at first stage, but then ultimately be productized so that you can deploy it. So just reach out to your account manager and you can get that conversation started, or go check out the SDK and see if you have a developer on staff that can just build the integration. Again, not again, but saying it again, I feel like since other webcasts, we have one of the easiest ways to build integrations in this market. The SDK makes it super simple, and just try it out, dive in. It's easier than you'd think. All right, next one. Can user access be scoped at the workflow or task level? So it's typically done at the business access controls, right? So the way that you would do that, and there might be a more technical way to get this done, but what I've seen people do is have a business class, an access control class like data ops, right? And then all of the data ops workflows that are in development are aligned to that data ops persona. And you could do that at a granular level, one business service per workflow if you wanted. Not very efficient, but there's ways to get that done. There might be other ways to do it, but for sure you can get people set up so that they have access just to the workflows that they should have access to. And you can do business services, other ways to do it too. All right, next one. Can we bring our own LLM or A model instead of the one shown? Absolutely. So we can connect to any LLM. You can connect to offline models, online models. It doesn't matter to us, right? We just want to connect and orchestrate it, all right?
Okay, I think that's all the questions, Scott, we have time for
okay.
today. We didn't get to all of them, but
Hmm.
we will get to them and make sure that you guys get answers to your questions, because there were a few more.
Yeah, so I can take a look at it and send answers back, or we can get somebody on the team if it's a technical question to answer for you guys.
Great, absolutely. All right, so thank you, Scott, again for sharing all those business and IT workflows. Great perspective from the front office and the back office, just additional ways that our customers can be using those workflows. Later today, like Scott mentioned, you will receive an email. It will contain the link to the recording. Make sure you rewatch the session, or if you want to share it with your colleagues, please do. And don't forget, this is a series, so we've got two more coming up. We've got one coming up on Tuesday, October 21st. This one is going to be Stonebranch and Hanako, building an SAP automation powerhouse. So again, thank you so much for joining today, and we look forward to seeing you on our next session. Have a good one.